Hello, if anyone can hear me, it's Philip Drozhinin and a Mud Flood Advanced Research channel. Well, we're supposed to have Tim Ozman, but something happened to Facebook and uh, I don't know if he can read my message because I couldn't read Facebook anything for 20 minutes or so, but I sent him a link to this hangout and he's supposed to be joining, but I guess something's wrong with the messenger or something. Well, whatever. Um, if he's not joining us, then we're gonna be talking about our future plans and what the hell we're gonna be doing here. Okay, so um, officials are striking back. Actually, well, I had this video yesterday. Let me let me see if I can find it. It's like about let's see the name. So it's like about the excursion or trip or something of one guy who is like has a very big channel in Russia, maybe like 300 subs or something like this. I don't quite remember. uh, One person is watching, it's probably me. Yeah, okay, let's see history. So it's like a very interesting video about them walking around Moscow undergrounds. They started from one river collector, or whatever, the sewers, and then went down to some other places and checked out those places and saw some ancient sewers and stuff like this. But actually, this is not what I was supposed to say. Uh, they were trying to talk about the excavated Moscow, and he's like starting to say about that Moscow is really not excavated; it's buried. So like he's trying to stick with the paradigm we are right now sticking to. Uh, Let me try to. Yes, Moscow is not excavated; it's buried. Yeah. Let me try to open this video so you can check it out. And let me screen share. So they are showing like the canalization or sewers entrance from the top, and what they're saying that the each and every trench or some different level of the ground was planned, so-called planned, and planned is that it was making a plane flat, so it's like level. And he was saying like look at this on the top. Yes, they bury the Moscow and they level the Moscow, so they make it more level, more plain. And we see the reconstruction of the Polytechnical Museum, and we see excavation, and we see those windows and doors underground, all those constructions. This is what actually is connected to that. We had a huge planning in 20th century, and they were leveling this place. all those trenches, all those uh, not equal places, not level places were leveled, and it's like 7 meters here. So he's literally saying that they were planning it, making it leveled, but actually this doesn't fit what we saw, uh, what we saw before, because you know leveling is okay, but when you see the pictures of the beginning of the 20th and not the beginning, um, yes, and the beginning of 20th century and the end of 19th century when this was constructed, and we see it already buried, how can you pull this information from the leveling in 20th century when the Soviets were planning the city? I mean, this is a this is a good revelation, but on the other side, he is debunking himself because check the pictures, dude, and you'll see that it was already buried in the 19th century, and during the construction, they before they started the construction, it was already buried, dude. So I mean, he's like trying to say something else. I mean, what he's trying to say is that Soviets were planning all this stuff and burying it on purpose. This is what he's trying to probably say, because probably we're gonna find some more of those examples pretty soon, and then we're gonna return to this topic of the Polytechnical Museum. And here we go. They already got the explanation. It was on a big channel. It has like how many views? It has 2 million and 500,000 views, and each and every one of those people is happy with this explanation because they didn't even check out the official photos of the construction and didn't even see that it was already buried in the 19th century. So it's like, wait a minute, guys, are you stupid, or you think we're stupid? It's like with this horse crap theory. When I first heard about this horse crap theory, like a whole bunch of people were hanging around in this hole. It's like maybe 500, 700 people listening to that guy, and most of them were sleeping and like never even taken serious what he was saying. But some of them, your fanatics, lunatics, zombie people, they were listening to me, and they were very intrigued by this 1 hour 1 hour explanation of horse crap theory, starting with the no trees debunking. I mean, I like those officials. They pull all this stuff together. The cultural layer itself is very interesting, and let's see if we have any questions in the chat, because I'm making this exactly for you guys, and hope anything can happen and you can see what I'm saying. Okay, let's see. I don't know what's happening today. Very strange, very strange. Everything is really strange. Let's see. I can't even watch my event right now, what I'm doing. They tell me it's not live. Oh, I'm coming out. 5 people watching. Okay, yes. Hello from Ireland. Hello from America. No questions at all. I mean, Tim Ozman is supposed to join us, but I don't know what's happening. Probably something went wrong with this messenger thing, because he's not even he didn't even check the message I've sent. So are you guys? Do you guys have any questions on the mudflood or Tartary? Maybe you're just free to go. I can answer. I have a half hour to answer all your questions. Let's see. What else can I present while you thinking about it? Okay. I started this channel just to, be more, have a backup first of all, and be more, protected, because each and any time we can be, we can be blocked, we can be banned and stuff like this. So it's not very good not to have a backup. Okay, let me show you some pictures, guys. I mean, right now I'm working on those mud volcano stuff, so it's like probably the explanation of the mud flood. But how we can pull all those mud volcanoes to the mud flood, actually, it's very interesting because it's all connected to the star forts, and the star forts were actually the places, the sites of all the stations of gas mining and different other minings. I mean, people send me a whole bunch of pictures, and I really cannot explain how those volcanoes, like a bunch of them, are, uh, how they were created originally by nature. Uh, but we can explain it if we know how gas and oil is mined, how the well is constructed, how the drilling is proceeded, how they do the preserving of the well after they finish, how they contain it, maintain it, and all this stuff, how they make a gas station from the well, and all this stuff. So it's like very interesting because each and every time when we have so huge mudslide somewhere in the mountains, people start and sending pictures of them and saying this is probably the cause, this slide. But not everywhere we have a mountain or a hill, like we have a huge valleys and they also mud flooded. So we have to understand that all those hills and mountains could be whatever, could be etheric cones of previous mining, byproducts, whatever. So easily could be some giants, who knows, not fossil petrified giants and stuff like this, who knows. So uh, literally the mountains are okay for explanation of a mudslide or mud flood, but valleys are not very good. Without the mountains they cannot perform a mudslide. So liquefaction also doesn't work because it doesn't have any flow or a stream on the valley, so it has to be some type of direction so it can be flowing somewhere and liquefying. And we didn't see any decent examples of liquefaction showing that the houses are very well preserved after liquefaction. All the houses are falling or leaning to the sides and cracking, and all those houses that we seen in those videos were wooden houses. So probably it's uh, it's pretty much explains. But but what the bricks houses that we see everywhere, they are safe, and they have just sunken first, second, and maybe sometimes third floors, and this is it. So no evidence of the flow, and people write saying no flood because no flow. I mean, flood can be like this. It could be slow, but it can be fast, you know, relating to a night. Or maybe it could be during the day, or it could be during the night. Who knows? I mean, if like, if it's done on purpose, it could be done in the night. So it's like a couple of hours, and the whole city is flooded with the mud, and it's raising, and immediately, if you won't escape the city, you'll be stuck in this trap of mud, because you cannot, it's not a boat. You cannot use a boat, you can't use anything. You get stuck in the mud as soon as you step out of your house, man. So it's like it's a very serious threat for the population of the city if it's not evacuated. I mean, okay, let's see. So all those houses that were left, and people also sent me a bunch of pictures showing just the basement floors. Possibly they could be the first and second floors on the previous building, but until you prove it, it's just a basement floor on a default. We cannot say for sure. We can admire the architecture, we can admire the um, arches, windows, spires if they have it, and we can say that it has a style of colonial style, Tartarian style, red brick style, whatever. So, but we cannot say for sure, and this is for the critics. Nobody says it for sure and claims it for sure to be buried until you visit the place, check out these basements and all this stuff. So uh, what I'm doing right now, I'm walking around and finding out all this evidence in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and different other cities. Like people send me footage from Georgia and stuff like this, and Georgia, not America, Georgia in Caucasus. So it's like very ancient Tbilisi city, the capital of Georgia. But a bunch of people send me pictures of houses like this with little basement windows here. They could be rebuilt, but you know, to be a mud flooded building, you have to supposed to have some signs of it. So it's like I've made a video about the mud flood signs, and those signs supposed to show people how do you exactly separate the men from the women. I mean, how do you separate the mud flooded building from the non just the windows of the basement floor? Very interesting, right? We also have a bunch of architectural fakery. I mean, I'm working right now on some issues like non-constructed buildings, and I've been presenting it in my last video on Philip Druzhinin's channel. So just a good idea, and I mean, why not? Because we see all this fakery, and we see all the pictures from the 19th century, which are changing towards the 20th century, and right now in 21st century, we see some different picture at all. We see some star force growing out of nowhere in a couple of years. I mean, this is very interesting. I've been showing all those pictures in the Richards video, and I don't know, something went wrong, and most of those pictures were not showing. So I supposed to like pick them up and make a full fourth part of my documentary. And in fact, I'm gonna be presenting it very soon. So a bunch of fakery going on, and we see those fake fortresses, fake star forts, fake cities, fake pyramids, fake sphinxes, fake stuff everywhere. So it's like the history is supposed to be researched more, because what I think is that war between Holy Romans and the Tartarians, the last two big pieces of empire, the Empire of Ross, the Empire of our world, and the Empire of Midgard, and they were split because the Griffin is the mix of the eagle and a lion, and the double-headed slashed or slashed-headed bird is a symbol of parasites. I mean, you know that the parasites are tightly related to crows and all the birds and stuff like this. So, I mean, this could be the last thing that happened to our ancestors. I mean, um, we were split, and some countries were under the Holy Roman Empire, which is like the Western world's representation, and Tartaria was the Asian or the Eastern world representation. And it had a fight, and probably it highly likely that it was composed to us as the crusades, so-called crusades, all those different wars between East and West, and those who were in the middle of those wars were always losing, and those who were watching from from the side, they're always winning, because in every conflict of two sides, there's a third side, third player that is undercover and actually uh, doing all this stuff to get some profits, amid those situations that's happened along the wars and all these profits from losing the independence. And we see, if we see something like letters or something like we can go down there, or we see so strange things like possible loading or entrances from below, and they're ugly implemented into the building, looking very old. In fact, this is really good evidence to check. And people, I think this is very good, because we have all this mud everywhere in the pictures of World War I, World War II. Everywhere we can go, we'll see the mud. You know, Actually, mud is mud is on every continent, and it's like has a thin layer of soil on the top, which is like black, and below that it's like yellow. Sometimes it's red yellow, and sometimes it's orange. Sometimes it's just a pure clay and stuff like this. But officials trying to buy some alternative researchers and uh, fill them with the paradigm that it could be falling from the sky, just to support this NASA and space program BS that they doing, and to stick to this paradigm. Look, we went to the space. What the hell are you talking about the mud flood? Just figure out what the comets were like. The comets were falling from the sky, and they could be possibly having this dust tail, and so the tail was falling in the atmosphere and dissolving in the atmosphere. So it was, you know, falling with the rain, and we had all those mud rains. But they forget about immediately frozen mammoths. They forget about all this. Frozen lands in Siberia, frozen lands in Canada, and all this stuff. So just forget about it, because they have their paradigm just to tell us all this BS about dust and sand. Some of them talking about volcano dust, volcano ash, and all this stuff. But 100 years of observations, I mean, of reliable observations, didn't show any big huge event that was led to for the clay to fall from the sky. I mean, no documented event of that was. I mean, we had some dust bowls, and people often show me and send me those pictures of dust bowls, but dust bowls could also be the result, the consequences of uh, in fact that actual mud flood, because it could be dried out, and uh, could be actually dry and become dust, and the wind could catch all this dust and have a dust bowl. Why not? Because it's a large territories that could be covered by all this dry mud and all this dry clay and all this dry sand and all this stuff. So it could be, why not? And so those dust bowls are just taking all this dust from all those mud floods. Why not? But after the mud floods, not before. We have a bunch of buildings of this, like in New York, and what are they trying to say? Is they trying to say that all this crap was falling on the streets, and so the people would have a better smell. They went up on the second and third floor, and the first floor, which was, you know, due to the raising of the street, was below, and they forgot about it and just started to give it as a rent, as whatever, rent this apartment for somebody. Who cares? What is the logical explanation of that? Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? We just talking about the crap, and this crap. If we're given this crap, who cares? How we explain it. This is how they built, they tell us, this is how they built. Exactly this way. Just imagine a huge, half tropical rain, and all this stuff would be flooded immediately, all this water inside. How does people live in here? I don't know. They built like this. It's very expensive, I guess, to live in New York, but each and any huge rain and all this stuff is getting flooded. Okay, let's see if we have any questions. Uh, Let me stop sharing. Been looking into all the original state capital in US. The construction evidence is pretty funny. Some really fake pictures from newspapers. Yeah, we you know the missing pictures are the pictures of the balls of nobility. How did they, have those huge dances with the huge crowds of noble elite people in all those fancy suits and dresses and all those stuff. And how did they do it in 19th century? Just give us a picture. The photo picture was already taken in 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, 1880s. It was huge, a whole bunch of pictures. Where's the pictures of each and every ball? Where's the picture of the winter? Show us the picture of the winter, people. We can't find any picture of the winter. The painting of the winter, guys with the winter clothes. No paintings of them. Share the stream. Who cares? Lilith. We don't want any crowd. We only want advanced people here. So you know, we don't want no trolls. We don't want all this famous stuff. So this is a whole bunch of missing pictures. We don't have pictures of the balls. We don't have the pictures of huge crowds in 1860s, 1850s. Only stage pictures with small amounts of people. Like somewhere they explain it with the exposure. Somewhere they explain it. The officials explain it with the exposure. Somewhere they try to explain it with something else. But the exposure explanation doesn't work at all. Doesn't work at all. You can send the link in the Facebook message. I can send the link. Where to? I've sent it a bunch of times, but nothing happens. Where's the hangout link? I don't know what's happening. Shows you here. Hangout link is above. I don't know how to send it. One more time. I send it just before that. Nothing happens. Something's wrong with the Facebook today, definitely, because you finally came.
Yeah, I'm here. Hey, thanks for the invite, Philip. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening today. We had a scheduled chat with Andreas Sirtus on Friday, and he also had had missed it, and so I was thinking like people trolling me and just didn't answer or something.
No. For the record, how do I pronounce your last name?
Uh, doesn't really matter. It's Druzhinin.
Druzin. Okay, I was just like wondering. Okay, so I have a number of people who are also interested in this topic, and you are the one you approached me and you said, just contact me. So I thought, why not? So yeah, because I look into it, and there are so many different areas it goes, and so I want to stay with what we can observe, and I'm also interested in your analysis of history and how truncated that is. And so when we're talking about this hypothetical worldwide catastrophe, when do you place it? And do you think this is something that occurs more than once throughout history, or is this like something that was just a one-time thing?
Well, what we see a set of pictures which are paintings, right? The gravures or paintings with set of pictures from 17th, 18th, and sometimes 19th century pictures that people were actually painting. And we see a set of pictures that were made by photographs, right? And those photographs come from 1840s and so on, 1850s, 1860s. Increasing number is like 1860s, 1870s, and before that we have like a few pictures, not very much. And we see some, we can see some streets, we can see some houses. And so while figuring this out and relating those pictures to each other, we see that it probably was caused by something in 19th century. And my timeline shows like it is like 1820s to 1850s, like 1845, 1846 could be also the day, because we see some houses that were built supposedly in the beginning of 19th century. But when we see those pictures, the paintings of those houses, we see them already built before. So it's like we cannot really rely on the paintings, because the paintings could be uh, misleading us into the timeline. But we can trust the pictures of the photographs, because they can, they are more reliable to me, at least, because I can, check out the 20th century, check out the end of 19th century, and check out the middle of 19th century, and figure out that something happened to the house or not, because we see the level of the floors changing, like the ground is like raising in the middle of 18 of 19th century. So it's like, supposedly, I suppose that it was before the 1850s, but not earlier than 1820s.
Okay,
Okay.
fair enough. So in your assessment here, then, the thing that's missing then is that there's no clear historical description of this. This is not taught in schools. So we're talking about a worldwide event that would have been known everywhere, but then it's been erased from the textbooks. And so are you thinking that this is a natural phenomenon or something used or some kind of weapon that we may not understand at this time?
Yeah, I think it's intentional action, and right now I'm on the process of making the fourth part of the documentary, which actually relates the possible mining of ancient times, to this mud flood, and actually ties up with the star forts also, because we see a bunch of star forts from on the plans of ancient maps, and we see them right now, so we can figure out that they what they are, that they built from the same technology worldwide, which also can be proven the worldwide event, because if we have star forts everywhere, then we possibly could have the same cause, because the star forts could be controlled with the same network, right? And if they are in the network, actually, because they could be the network of the previous miners, and so on and so forth, because the star force actually doesn't explain the defense of the star fort, because it doesn't make sense. Any fortress, any small fenced amount of space is not safe for those who protect it. It's easily can be proven in any kind of discussion. I mean, you can easily smoke them out, you can just starve them out, you cannot do whatever to kill those people, and you actually can do it. So it's not a protection, it's not a defensive system. It probably had some other defensive purposes, and it could be used like we had in Avatar, like we had a miners which had a protected um, territory with some um, some energy weapons, or whatever you call it, or maybe shields, energy shields, that protected this territory from the local avatars and local animals and stuff like this. So this could be some structures that could be protecting those miners doing their job, and actually could be the stations between those star forts or cities, whatever we call it. And in Russian, we call them stations, and this is the unit of the country house. It's like a small town was called a station, And it's very funny because most of those stations have gas mining stations, and the gas mining stations, the gas mining well looks exactly the form of the shape of the arrows coming out of the center. So it's like a fracking station, fracking well. And so the fracking can easily explain drilling, and drilling could explain the mud coming on from underneath, because we have a bunch of pressure with the gas and stuff like this, and if it's not contained, or if it's not maintained very well, it could easily be a catastrophical even in our times, because we have all those spills everywhere. And so it could easily be explaining like this. So I don't know if it makes sense for you what I'm trying to say, but I'm on the way to figuring this stuff out.
Okay, yeah, another aspect to this that I find compelling is worldwide evidence. That's what made me pay attention. I thought it was a local thing in Russia when I first looked at it, and I kind of dismissed it. But then someone pointed out to me, no, the other indicator here is an almost universal style of architecture that points to a common origin. And so, would you speak on the architecture for a minute and what we're actually looking at when we're looking for or examining this evidence of some type of a flood involving large amounts of sediment?
I mean, this style of architecture could easily be explained with the colonial style that we see and we observe worldwide, and but they can say it's a fashion, it's the architectural influence or whatever you call it. But we see the paganism and the pagan style that was before the Christianity, so it couldn't be performed in the Christian countries or the Muslim countries or Hinduistic countries or Japan, but we have those buildings in all those cities, all those towns, all those countries. I mean, so it's like Star Force also the same architectural style. It's red brick, mainly arched windows. All those red brick buildings, like I mean, the red brick production itself, it could be a worldwide production. Who knows? Because uh, it also can explain the technology and the style, because if they use the same material, they could be probably using the same techniques and technologies. But we see a bunch of so-called megalithic structures, right? This also can be found each and everywhere in Northern America, in Southern America, in Israel, in Egypt, in Russia, in Europe. We have a bunch of megalithic structures. In Japan, we have a bunch of megalithic structures. We have a bunch of pyramids in China. We have a bunch of pyramids in Egypt. So could be actually the case, because not only the megalithic structures are the same, the red brick structures are the same, the star forts are the same. What else we have to pull to this, consequence of, evidence?
Okay, so the universal nature of it, since it's pretty much uniform everywhere, it all sort of implies that whoever was behind it is behind covering it up and is in possession of whatever who came before had in terms of technology and knowledge about history. So as far as our historical record, how far back do you think we can trust our history, if at all? Or do you think it's all pretty much made up in order to censor what was before the 19th century?
I mean, they use the same technologies they were using 200, 300 years ago. Check out the evidence of the technologies of 19th century. You'll find out that we use it today. Each and every day we have something invented, so-called invented, but actually we have it, pulled back from the 19th century, or maybe the beginning of 20th. So, and so are they. They use the political leadership technologies that they had before. So it's like divide and conquer, mislead, and control the opposition. So those who are in profit, actually they work as a managers, they work as a puppet show for those who control it. And I'm on the way to actually unveil or reveal the classes or the groups that are actually in control, the so-called order group. I've made a video about them. They are the high conspiracy group of leadership in military questions, and they control a bunch of different clans like banksters, religious mafia, and so on and so forth. And we have a nationalist and globalist also fighting right now So there's two different other groups. They also have control of the previous one, to the banksters and so on. So it's all connected network, and they don't care about us. Actually, they believe they are some other kind of species, some other kind of humanoids. So they probably mixed with those parasites. They came here and started all this thing working, because we have a bunch of evidence of all those intrusions, the so-called floods in the Bible, and in different other mythologies. The flooding of Atlantis, so-called, disappearance of Atlantis, also is flood. So it's like flood is everywhere. In Russian mythology, we have a bunch of floods, and so it's and so on and so forth. It's like, I think the flood is actually the technology to enter the world. So they enter the world and they control it. They make the people believe in their controlled beliefs, the religions, so-called religions, and the religions enslave the people mentally. They become sheeple and they don't care. So that technology is used all over again and each and every time. So you've asked about the resets, and I think yes, there was a previous reset. So, and we have a bunch of evidence that people actually were missing for a while, and we have a bunch of evidence of orphanage and all these kids, whole bunch of kids in the beginning of 20th century, whole bunch of kids in the beginning, in the end of 19th century, orphanage houses, all those trains of kids, circling and circling stuff. And I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but we have this evidence and we can, check it out by ourselves. We have a bunch of people who know their, ancestor lines for a couple of centuries, but can they really trust it, or can they really trust all those archives?
Yeah, that's
It,
that's what brought me into this. I was thinking, because I've been looking really hard at the media and at media hoaxes in the last 20 years, and those have become history because nobody challenges it in sufficient numbers. And I'm thinking, well, it's not like they just started hoaxing us when I started paying attention. So the mainstream media is a record of a very selective interpretation of reality that suits the elite. So there's no reason to think that history is not the same thing. So my interest in this was people going back at old pictures and questioning everything we've been told, because our histories are what form the basis for the political wars of today. And if they lied about the Civil War and its results, if they lied about those pasts, then what are we fighting over now? And so I'm just trying to get to the truth. And so I'm looking through this topic to see what people have uncovered about pre-Civil War and what we can actually rely on when it comes to the historical record. How objective is it? And I'm also interested in how this ties into religions. So what are your thoughts on let's say the Vatican, for example, or the papacy? Do you think that they have this long history of 2,000 years that they describe? Or do you think it's more or less a farce with a much younger history?
I mean, they are owners of different property, right? And most of this property, this somehow related to churches, so, or cathedrals, or something like this. But what we found in our research, that the people that lived before were using those objects, those constructions, different way. And probably we lost all this technology right now and we don't use it, but we can use it in some other devices, but we don't use it in those big places, except maybe at one place in Jerusalem, where we have a church, when one time in a year, in the Easter, pretty much soon, by the way, they're gonna light up the light, so-called light. But where this light comes from, somebody says it's some priest, lighting up with this lighter, gas lighter or something like this. But somebody saw piezo elements or some ether lightnings on the wall. Somebody pictured this or somebody pictured that, and some physicist made even the scientific research there, and he figured out that it's a static electricity, some type of atmospheric electricity, probably is lighting up the light. So if those devices were working that way, they were the power stations before. And the priests could be electricity workers, because they have all those dresses that are protecting them from the electricity charge. and all this stuff. And the people could be walking there to charge their devices. It's like a charging station, who knows, or maybe it was like something else. So they could be having like multiple purposes. I mean, the church crosses could be used as antennas, who knows, because people in Russia, when the television was booming in the 90s, they were trying to make different forms of antennas for new channels, because we have a limited wavelength that was promoted for those channels, and they were mixing those antennas, and they figured out the Russian church cross with this regular cross, and this little stuff here looks like a perfect TV antenna, and they had the perfect signal, and they even wrote it in some magazine, but it was forbidden to say about this. So it's like we have a bunch of evidence that all those churches are not what we know. And so when you ask me about this or that confession, this or that church, I just refer to what I said before. It's an order is controlling all this stuff. The religious mafia is religious mafia itself. It doesn't have any other definition. It's not a religion, it's a religious mafia. It's made for making their own purposes. So it's what I'm trying to say in my
Okay.
videos.
Okay. Well, so I've been really interested in Freemasonry and how they've taken the lexicon of stoneworking and turned it into a mystical system and a system, an allegorical system. And Albert Pike, who wrote the Scottish Rite, he wrote the degrees number 4 through 33. He said that the lower ranks are intentionally misled about the meanings of the symbols and the signs and the stories that they teach. And so when I think about that, it completely explains their cathedrals, how we're told that it means one thing, but it's actually just a cover for a hidden technology. And in a way, I can understand how that works, where an antenna becomes a cross, and it's keeping us on the exoteric, outside, uninitiated interpretation. And even the word elite and elect and electricity in the language, it even suggests something here, something of those who are elevated to know this stuff. And
Illuminated.
illuminated, there you go. So I could see how it works. I mean, if you were to flood out the masses of populations here and then you rebuild, you could brainwash them and having them kneel before a direct TV dish every Sunday.
Yep, that's what they did.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And as far as history goes, to me, it's a no-brainer that it's totally controlled. But what I find most interesting about the mud flood is it suggests that we didn't crawl out of a dark ages, but that we may in fact have been dragged down a few notches. And that's where I'm interested. What are your thoughts on the so-called dark ages?
I don't think there were dark ages at all, because what we heard about the official paradigm. First it was Stone Age, then it was Bronze Age, then it was Iron Age, then it was uh, antique times, so-called Greco-Roman times, Egypt times. Then it was the beginning of Christianity, which was referring to medievals, and then it was Renaissance, and after Renaissance it was some more dark ages, and I don't know, maybe even those revolutions of the capitalistic stuff happened in Holland and England, and then it came boom. We have all those inventions, we have all this production going on in 19th century out of nowhere. We have all those technologies from the 19th century that we still use for now for 200 years. Nothing principles of the internal combustion engine didn't change from the steam machine. All this electricity, we're still using it, not wireless. We use the wired electricity from the 19th century. We use television from the 19th century. We use radio from the 19th century. So it's like, in fact, we use turbines. All the turbines, I found out that turbines are used from the 19th century, and the first gas turbines were made in 18th century. So it's like So the jet engines that we use in our airplanes, so-called airplanes and so-called jet engines, are the turbines from the 18th century. It's like very fascinating because I was, the question is simple. They align to us. I mean, how can else they perform this way, because they need to dumb down the population, because they need to break the education system. Each and every future generation becomes dumber. Remember why we were so scared about the generation X? Look what we have now. Look what we have now. I mean, it's really.
Yeah, I have this book I read a few years ago by Ayn Rand, The Romantic Manifesto. And in this book, she's contrasting the minds of the 19th century through literature with those of the 20th century, the architecture, 19th century, 20th century, and the art. And this book is basically saying that from her point of view, she says it's pretty obvious that man has for some reason, lost something. And she thinks it was a problem of philosophy, and she blames collectivism and the devaluation of the individual. But the more I look at it and her background, where she came from, I think she's someone who, in her own life, actually was able to perceive the difference pretty starkly, because now it's kind of hidden. But maybe she saw it through literature, and so I'm wondering here. Obviously, if there was a higher civilization before, then there's going to be technologies that, of course, like you're saying, are from way back then that we're still using today. Hasn't been much progress since then. So as far as the architecture goes, do you think there's been any improvement on anything since then, or are we just making pale imitations?
I mean, they figured out that it's very expensive to build this architecture each and every time. So I think what they doing is they building maybe like 20% of decent architecture and 80% of crappy architecture right now. This is the Pareto rule that they use, and I think only 20% will survive the next reset, and they're gonna use it one more time after the reset, so they can establish their empires again. And 80% was going to be just, dissolve in a couple of years. So it's so crappy. I mean, it won't stick around for like 100 years or during the reset, because I mean, reset is long enough to all this stuff, glass, concrete, all this low quality constructions will totally dissolve in water and rains, and so the nature will take over, and they simply will make maybe the highly populated areas of Siberia, of Tartaria before. Look at them now; they're totally frozen with the mud. So the highly populated areas would be probably, prohibited to visit, or maybe be some type of Antarctica there or something like this. So they can change the paradigm each and every time, because the people will be literally in Stone Age when they wake up after reset, and they find out that all their kids are stolen and they're just starving out. So it's like they probably will be. The technology is very simple. They have the teams of so-called firemen or bomberos, which are, hanging around these survivors. And if they find any books or something like this, they, make them burn those books. Or if they, right now, what do we have? We don't have any books anymore. We can easily be deleted by a simple pressing some type of button, and some virus will come in each and every PC and erase all the data. We don't have any books anymore. So
Yeah,
it's.
that's a good point. There was a library, a famous library at this laboratory close to where I live. And I remember the year they shut it down and they replaced it with a digital library. And my problem with it was, well, now burning a book is just a matter of pushing a button. And then two, you get rid of serendipity. So, you browse through a library, you randomly grab something that catches your eye, and you find something you wouldn't have found otherwise because you weren't looking for it. Well, now with targeted searches, they actually remove that. And the lack, yeah, exactly. And as far as the susceptibility for this information to be deleted, yeah, that's very easy. And right now, for example, people in New Zealand could be charged with a crime for possessing that fake manifesto from that event. And this is because they don't want you to get this information that doesn't go through their filters. And this is how they always operate. And in a way, it reminds me of pretty much every revolution. You destroy the old and bring the new. Anybody who has the old is a counter-revolutionary, and they have to be removed.
Yeah. This was exactly written in Fahrenheit 451. So, I mean, the idea of this Bomberos and firemen came from this book. And so, I mean, this is how they control us. I mean, um, simply they can use each and every different method anytime. So it's like a game. They pick the method of reset and they do it. If they want to do a war, they do a war. If they want to do a bacteriological weapon, they do some type of epidemia, stuff like this. We have like in Dark Ages the so-called epidemias of cholera and how do you call it? Um,
Like the
The
bubonic plague.
plaque, yeah. And so the plaque columns have been shown in on one of my videos. They look exactly like the mud flood. So like the mud flood is coming from the skies, something like this. Like fontaine is coming of mud coming towards the sky, something. So it's like
Right.
they can tell us whatever they want.
Well, I've been interested in this subject for a while of floods because the myths, and then of course when I saw that Elon Musk's rocket, the BFR, was called an ark, and there's all this talk of an ark to Mars, and I'm like, wait, ark? Why? Because the world's going to be flooded. Why? Global warming. Who told us the world's going to get flooded? NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration that works with NASA. So they actually call it NOAA. And not only that, but their symbol is the dove flying over the ocean, which is Noah's symbol. So it's already scripted. And so I was already in my head thinking they're probably going to flood us out somehow. And only the people who buy into the space program will survive this thing because they're totally brainwashed. And they will think they're on Mars or something and they'll be in Siberia. That's been my contention. I mean, it's just a guess, but I think they've been planning to flood us out. And I'm wondering, well, what is the flood going to be? Is it going to be water? Is it going to be a bubonic plague? Is it going to be nerve gas distributed by drones or something? I mean, it could be anything, like you said. And I do think you're right that they can pick and choose. And I say they, I mean whoever could possibly orchestrate and control such a massive slate cleaning where they just wipe the world clean except for their chosen. And even the stories about revelations and apocalypse always has the saved who are spared because they conformed, and then the rest are the sinners who are wiped out. So I kind of see it in their blueprints. So then when someone brought mud flood up to me as, well, if you're looking for a flood, it may have happened more recent. That changes everything. If it was 1,000 years ago, that's one thing. But a couple hundred years ago means we're in a tightly controlled, mediated reality.
Yeah. This is a problem because what they don't like about this mud flood and why they send so many trolls and why I maybe was a little bit pissed off when I saw your channel and I said, oh, one more guy trying to talk about the mud flood and uh, pull the people towards the topic at the point that he doesn't even understands what we were doing for 2 years, explaining stuff because so many people came out. I mean, just a bunch of trolls came out immediately at 1 second, like when the Max Sigan started talking about it and referring to mudflood in October. I mean, the huge hype came out. So it's like I was trying to monitor each and every new channel that's coming out to understand where we're going to. I mean, if they have I mean, we can have some good guys coming out, we can have some trolls. And so I have to know who is trolling and who is taking it serious and researching it. So right now, in the process of understanding who is really the future leaders of this movement. I mean, I'm trying to help everybody to promote their channels and to get more viewers, to get more subscribers, to get people know them. And I think you one of those channels that we supposed to be promoting actually, and let you do it because you have a better understanding of what's going on in your place, in your city. You can find more evidence by yourself because this is the lack of information right now. People showing us the old pictures of 19th century, 20th century. What I'm trying to do in Russia, I'm going out on the streets and finding those buildings right now and checking them out because it's really good evidence for all those critics, all those trolls. and we can shut them down with all this flow of evidence from each and every city that we live in. And so this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to ignite the people to go outside and check those buildings, and maybe go downstairs and talk to owners or something, because sometimes you cannot just go downstairs and check out if that was a basement, or does it have any signs of the mud flooded building. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to do. And maybe I answered your questions right now, but I'm little it's a little late, so for me to follow what exactly you're trying to ask me.
Yeah, actually, I was leading to that because I was going to say, where is this going? Because in other topics I look into, like with the topic of um, investigating the space program and looking into what we've been told about our cosmography, we've been sold a bill of goods. The whole thing's false, and so we're researching it. And so I'm reverse engineering the big deception, and part of that means going down to the past. But I was thinking, I see a lot of channels getting lost in Bible stories and in myths, which is fine. But I want to find the objective facts to get a figure on where we are right now. And so I'm trying to stick with mainly the investigation. And I was thinking, well, if everybody interested in this topic goes to places in their area, and we can start making the case that, yeah, beyond just these older photos, there's stuff all around us, then we make some real progress, and it might actually trigger something as far
Yeah,
as, like, for example, downtown where I live, I've always noticed these old buildings in a certain part of town, similar structure, but they have radioactive basement shelters. So, and I'm like, when were we going to be hit with anything that would require bomb shelters beneath these buildings? And it's pretty consistent. And we're just looking around, and yeah, we do manage to see a lot of bricked up archways under certain areas. And so I'm looking, what are the common refutations? And people say different things. They raise the levels to sanitize, or they were raised up because of a layer of debris built up over centuries, which is absurd in itself. So I'm looking at the evidence that's being posited and then the counter evidence, and I'm just kind of going where the information leads. And I'm trying not to get stuck in any rabbit holes or any preconceived notions.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, I like where people are going with this, but I don't want to take too many leaps right now. So as far as like suppressed technologies, I'm totally aware of what could be and what the indicators would be. So really quick, I know it's late over there. What are your thoughts on these ancient structures being used for harnessing atmospheric electricity, and how can we validate that?
It's pretty easy, because people, like 2 years ago, guys were sending me footage, and I've been posting it. They doing pretty much the same stuff with the balloons. They putting balloons in the air, and with those wires sticking from the air to the ground, and measuring the voltage and all this. So it's totally proven. It works. We have a bunch of channels in Russia, and probably some channels in America, with this screwing around with all this electricity stuff, and I've been showing a couple of those experiences. It totally works. It totally works, and it could be used, and it probably, but I'm not saying it was the only purpose of those buildings. What I'm trying to say is that those buildings were used in multi-purpose, and there was a network, like there was a network of star forts before that. The cities that were built near the star forts were the prolongation of this technology. I mean, this is the next step. First, you build a star fort, like mine the area, establish the energy route like gas or something like this. So it can, the profit can support the uh, further city expansion, and then you put the city to the place. Then you have to be more aggressive to locals. Then it comes out to slavery and the parasitic role of those miners that we are talking about. This is where it comes. So it's like, who were those miners before? Were they giants? Because we see a bunch of evidence that those buildings were also designed for giants. But we see some mythologies and books that are talking about giants as a regular situation in ancient times. So probably giants were living along the normal size man, and highly likely that they were even protecting them. So, and maybe used and breeded by those men to protect them, of course, because giants could be just a weapon, just another technology but used in ancient times, breeding some dragons, breeding some, um animals that can be, used as a weapon. So each and every biological weapon could also be like, some mosquitoes could be transferring disease, and so also could be used as a weapon. So I mean, there's a bunch of technologies that ancients could be using. And what we have to do right now is just, stick to the evidence, like you're trying to say that you want to do the videos about technology. So maybe something, maybe you want to do something about the giants, maybe you want to do something about the flat earth. It's like all connected to this stuff, because reset is the key point to each and every thing that they beline to us. I mean, space program is also connected to the reset. Mudflood is connected to the reset. Alternative history is also connected to the reset. I mean, what we have to do is just show the people the truth. In Russia, we already had this technology when YouTube was influencing the actual life. We had elections of one guy. He's controlled opposition dude, and so one YouTube blogger started trolling him, and he had pretty good influence, like 1 million subs at that time. And he used those subs to go to those meetings of that candidate and troll him with those questions. Now this exact the same guy is doing the same thing on Ukraine. We have the Ukraine elections, like probably next week or maybe even this week. I don't know. So it's like they doing exact the same thing. So YouTube can influence real life, and I'm pretty sure of that because I'm working with YouTube in my job. I'm the YouTube manager, professional YouTube manager. I'm sure that YouTube can change life, and if we do it exactly how the technology works, if we ask those questions when it's the right time, when those political guys come to us, maybe on some meetings or rallies, whatever you call them. They're gonna be rallies in the USA, probably not very long to wait for it. So I mean, we can also promote these ideas with the banners, like flat Earth banner on the rally of Trump would be very interesting for him to see in his back. I mean, people go and do it in the media because sheeple is watching the TV and sheeple will see, oh, Trump, oh, flat Earth, oh, what the hell? So I mean, if they're gonna be asking Trump about flat Earth, he's supposed to say something. If they're gonna be asking Bernie Sanders about flat Earth, he's gonna be supposed to say something. I mean, it's not like Obama saying we don't have time for meeting of flat Earth Society. I mean, when you're gonna ask him about the mud flood, it's also going to be the topic because they showed Putin maps of Tartaria, and Putin was standing along those maps and watching at them and looking at them. And after that, this was verified by Putin. I started to researching it more, and you know how many people joined this movement after Putin was showing up with those maps. So I mean, this is the same old thing. Like any basketball player could be involved. Any press conference could change the narrative of the press conference, and bring it to the level of what do you think about? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And he's supposed to answer something, and they can change it because it's freedom of speech, and they cannot shut down each and every person. uh, if you go to official meeting and use this technology, you're gonna bring this to the media, you're gonna bring this, and they can't just cut it at each and every time because it's live. Sometimes it's each and everybody's smartphone picture of filming this, so it's like you cannot change it. It's like working. I mean, it's working, really working, and YouTube can change it, and we can change it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And that's one of the reasons why they try to control it, and that's why they send in trolls, and that's why they try to distract people who create content, and they attack your character. And it's pretty obvious tactics. I'm used to it by now. Now, with this topic, have you seen any examples of it in pop culture, predictive programming, any hints of it, like we have with Flat Earth or 9/11? Have you seen any predictive programming suggesting a previous catastrophe?
Yeah, Magic Pot. Have you heard about this fairy tale, Magic Pot?
Magic Pot? No.
It's like when the porridge comes out of a magic pot. It's like, and you cannot stop it because you don't have the word that shut it down. So it's like I've showed this in one of my videos. Very interesting fairy tale by Brothers Grimm, I think their name. So it's like very famous German writers of fairy tales. So it was already performed. I mean, we have a bunch of this stuff. Like we have fairy tales with the Apple devices. I mean, the guy is watching the plate, like saying "mirror, mirror on the wall," but he's like saying, "Yo, I want to see this girl," and like a mirror or a plate is like rolling, the apple rolling on the plate, and it's loading, and you see the image. Where exactly is that? You like TV broadcast. So it's like we have a bunch of this cargo code stuff each and everywhere. I mean,
Well, I was looking at this movie, TV series called The Shannara Chronicles, and it's just like this fantasy Lord of the Rings type stuff. I read the books when I was a kid, so I was watching, and on one of the episodes, you have the elves and orcs and humans doing their thing in a forest. Well, one of the characters falls down a hole in the ground, like a pit, and at the bottom of the tunnel, she finds herself in a 20th century ballroom, and there's an entire submerged 20th century city that this episode takes place in. And I came across this when I first started looking into this mud flood topic. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Because the story was, you would think this was like Dark Ages, but beneath the forest was the 21st century. And
mm-hmm,
when these characters are moving through it, you see newspaper clippings showing you what happened, and it was some type of a war. And
mm-hmm,
one of the characters points to a copy of Man Lands on the Moon, and she laughed at it and said, like that ever happened. But to me, that was the
yeah.
only time I've ever seen this idea of like a hidden past beneath our feet, literally, like this.
What about Jupiter Descending? The movie about the harvesting of people.
I haven't seen that one yet. I'll have to look at it now.
Yeah, the Matt Damon shorter video, the movie when the people were getting shorter just to save the world, smaller and smaller. It's like we were talking about the giants, how they were breeding us. So it's like we have a lack of resources, and they figured out if we live like this further, we're gonna die like in a couple of 100 years. So they started propaganda for people to get smaller and live in smaller cities, decreasing their height, and so they have less resources for more people. So like a gram would be a ton and something like this. So it's like very interesting movie.
What?
Also about the Lord of Rings. Remember the orcs, where are they coming from? They cut the trees and they dig them in the mud, and so this is how they grow in the orcs. Those zombie army of orcs, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. They essentially grow them like larvae. But now, Lord of the Rings also does have these scenes where you got these big towers sticking out of these fields of mud. And that's what it would look like post mud flood, the buildings that survived poking out. And then, of course, it's just returned to the Dark Ages.
Yeah, looks like. And also dragons and all those creatures could be um, easily exterminated after they are done. So after they are done, their purpose is done. They can be exterminated by the people, because it's not very hard to imagine how it could be done with a giant or somebody. They can be proclaimed as human eaters, cannibals, or whatever. So hunt the giants, and each and every one will hunt a giant. Hunt a, you know, mammoth. Everybody's gonna be hunting a mammoth. So it's like in China they had all this crazy stuff in 50s, like when those communist leaders told them, let's hunt those little birds, they eating our crops. And each and every Chinese, if they saw that little bird, I don't know how do you call it, not a pigeon but smaller, uh, if you see this little bird, this everybody's going out of the bus and like they're trying to catch him, each and they running from, so it won't be like tired, and they catch him and kill him. So it's like you can tell these people whatever you want and they're gonna be responding, and because they're enslaved, they're sheeple. Propaganda works.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I think they're doing with the space program and environmentalism is they're getting people to think about sustainability and getting smaller, reducing their carbon footprints, reducing the size of their families and how much they consume as individuals. And I think it's all gearing people towards a new form of feudalism, dressed up like the Jetsons.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the topic of flat Earth or globe Earth and all this stuff, what are your thoughts on the history of the development of, like, for example, the Copernican revolution? So the globe didn't happen overnight, and we have these historical accounts that back it up. If our histories have been rewritten to suit an agenda and hide certain technologies, and if they provided us with fake science, do you think this adds credibility to the people questioning the globe, or you think that the globe is still viable
I
with
mean,
everything else?
it's a franchisee. If the franchisee works, they sell it. So it's like if Christianity works, they sell it. They sell it to different other versions so they can see how they work. Maybe they making more money. And so it's a space program, same like this. They have, government space program. They have a private space program, and whoever is lying better gets more money, right? So it's like uh, the technology of getting the all these budgets from the government, and where the government gets all this money, it gets it from the taxes, and where the taxes come from, we work those taxes. So we're paying for these experiments that are not making any sense for us. I mean, 30 years passed since the fall of Soviet Union, and how many uh, scientific discoveries did they give us from space programs? I mean, we can count them like maybe one, two, three. That's it. So like no progress at all. What are they paying? What are we paying for? Each and every uh, kilogram of weight brought to the space station costs us about $10,000. I mean, and they are bringing to the space stations. What are they bringing? They bring in baseball bats, they bring in footballs, bring in jerseys, they bring in Santa Claus costumes, they bring in numerous Nikons and Canons, and they have no evidence of any decent picture of evidence of the circumference or the round ball Earth to us. I mean, all they give us to us is like fake stuff. I mean, I haven't seen any decent video or picture that I could say like it's totally proven by me. I mean, although I'm not perfect in Photoshop and all this CGI, but I can see the production. I can see it's totally fake. I mean, I'm looking at Roscosmos videos, the analog of NASA, Russian NASA. I mean, they show total nonsense. I mean, when I look at Putin trying to tell us about his new weapons of nuclear missiles that have nuclear engines that can travel, and full each and every missile defense system that NATO is bringing. And like he's showing the cartoons from 2007 with these weird 3D graphics. I mean, he was paying for this slideshow? I mean, this is totally nonsense, and people like laughing at Putin. Just imagine how we laughing at NASA and the Roscosmos. I mean, it's totally BS CGI footage, nothing else.
Yeah, and you know what's bothers me about this though is that they get better and better with the CGI over time, but that doesn't change the fact that they were really bad at it before. So the fake stuff is being replaced by stuff that's more realistic, but they never had to answer for the real fake stuff. They just kind of ignored it and kept going, realizing eventually they're going to make a perfect, convincing illusion, and then they can just forget the rest of it. And that's kind of where I see people going is this total lack of skepticism when it comes to video coming from authority, whether it's nightly news, celebrity drama, or outer space. And and now I'm looking at how history is so politicized and it's being used every day. I'm happy to go back through history with a fresh set of eyes and with no preconceptions because they put us into opposing groups, obviously. This divide and conquer. And it's so old that yeah, they actually instigate real war, real hatreds, real bigotries. And I'm like, well, I'd like to know, you know, how valid these things are, and is it all just distraction? And this idea of a recent reset kind of makes my point. If we can show that there's been a recent reset 200 years ago, then pretty much everything that we're fighting over is BS, because obviously we haven't been here long enough for any real form of animosities to have been developed. We're like in a petri dish. We all have amnesia, and then they tell us who to hate, and we go along with it. So I like the idea of deconstructing history the same way I deconstruct the news every day, and that's one of the reasons why I'm personally looking into this topic.
Yeah, that's great that I met you, and pretty glad that you joined me today for this chat. If you have any more questions, you can easily contact me anytime. We can, schedule another one, and maybe I can come to your channel, and we can talk at your hangout and something like this. So
Yeah, that sounds great. Hey, I appreciate you taking the time, and I'll definitely stay in touch. Have a
yeah,
great day, Phil.
thanks guys for watching. See you later.